Spoilers ahead! Hello, welcome back to I Am Movies. The movie begins in a small neighborhood named The Glen. We see Fontaine, a leader of a drug-dealing gang. He is lifting weights when a young boy named Junberg arrives. The boy informs Fontaine about the rival drug dealers operating in their area. So they decide to go to the location, and Fontaine hits one of the rival dealers with his car, injuring him. Fontaine explains that it was just a warning, not a threat. Later, the injured drug dealer informs his boss Isaac about Fontaine's actions, and Isaac vows to seek revenge. Meanwhile, Junberg asks Fontaine if he can join the drug-dealing business, but Fontaine refuses. Following his usual routine, Fontaine goes to a store, buys some drinks, and buys a lottery ticket, but he doesn't win, like always. On his way out, he pours a drink for an old beggar named Frog. When he returns home, we see there's a photo of Fontaine's deceased brother Ronald hanging on the fridge. He then makes a sandwich for his mother, who rarely leaves her room. After a while, Fontaine's supplier visits him with a pizza box that carries drug money after failing to collect money from a pimp named Slick Charles. Fontaine decides to confront Slick Charles and seeks information from a prostitute named Biddy about where to find him. Unbeknownst to Fontaine, Isaac is closely monitoring his actions. At the same time, one of Slick Charles's prostitutes, Yo-Yo, decides to quit the trade and goes to Slick Charles to demand his money. On his way there, he encounters Yo-Yo, who is very upset. Fontaine then goes to Slick Charles's place and asks for all the drug money while searching the house. Slick Charles tells Fontaine that he will return his money in a few days. Fontaine leaves the scene and gets into his car. However, just as he's about to depart, Isaac and his associate ambush Fontaine by shooting and killing him. Slick Charles also witnesses Fontaine's death. The next morning, Fontaine wakes up from a nightmare. Later, he goes to his normal routine by lifting weights and going to the store as usual, buying some drinks and purchasing a lottery ticket. On his way home, he spots a wounded man on the road. A car quickly takes the wounded man, and he finds it confusing. However, he goes home and makes a sandwich for his mother that remains locked in her room. He then notices the pizza box on the table, which makes him think. Meanwhile, he goes to Slick Charles to get his money, which he took already last night. Slick Charles is scared because he saw Fontaine get shot the previous night, but Fontaine doesn't believe him, leading to a heated argument. Slick insists that Yo-Yo also saw him coming to his place that night, so Fontaine and Slick decide to go meet Yo-Yo. In the car, Yo-Yo stated that he saw Fontaine last night walking into Slick's place and heard a gunshot after. Angrily, Fontaine asks Yo-Yo if she saw him die, and Yo-Yo confirms it. She explains that someone came in a car and shot Fontaine, and he died there. Then another person came, picked him up, and took him away. Fontaine asks Yo-Yo about the car, and she reveals that she knows the car. The three of them head to where the car is at. Yo-Yo tells them that this black car is what he saw after the shooting happened. Fontaine notices the same black car is the same one who took the wounded man earlier that morning. They went to the house where the car was parked, and it appeared empty. They saw no one, but the coffee was still hot, which made them think someone was there not too long ago. Upon searching the house, they discover a hidden elevator leading to the basement. The three of them enter the elevator and descend to the basement, where they find a secret lab. Inside, Fontaine confronts a white scientist and demands answers. The white scientist admits he's part of a mission, which has a widespread presence. In the lab, Slick comes across a white powder, thinking it's cocaine, so he tries it and packs it into a package. However, this powder contains some laughing chemicals, which amuses Slick. Fontaine then asks Slick to cover him as he will check the lab. After a while, the white powder makes Slick laugh, and then Yo-Yo causes a small explosion, and Slick accidentally shoots the white scientist, killing it. They immediately run, but before they leave, the trio discovers a corpse lying on a table, identical to Fontaine. Everyone becomes alert, especially towards Fontaine. The body looks like him and has bullet wounds. The trio drives home to Yo-Yo's grandma's place and spends the night there. However, Fontaine is getting more and more anxious to find out the truth. The next morning, he goes back to the same house with his friends, but overnight, the elevator and lab have disappeared from there. Fontaine went back to Yo-Yo and Slick and told them what he saw, but Slick suggested they need to eat while he tells them the story so they could plan better. They saw a commercial on the TV for a fried chicken and suggested to go eat there. When they got there, they started eating, and Slick noticed that Fontaine was laughing, which he knew he never laughed, and Slick noticed that everyone in the restaurant was laughing, which made him think that the chicken had that white powder he took from the lab. He wonders if the same substance was used on the chicken they had eaten. Yo-Yo then was tasked to ask the restaurant manager for an answer. Then, Yo-Yo notices that CCTV cameras have been placed all around the city, and someone is watching them closely. None of them were aware of this surveillance. Yo-Yo suggests that these people might be testing them in some way, and every product they encounter might contain a white substance. The conversation is interrupted when they notice the two white people are delivering something inside the restaurant and think they are drug dealer. The trio follows the van, and it stops at a hair salon, where Yo-Yo and Fontaine investigate to see the hair products also contains drug. While Slick goes inside the van, he finds a government ID and takes it. He then searches the back and finds different products that contains drugs. After that, Fontaine's rival recognizes him and makes a heated argument. The two white people go back to the van and Slick is stuck inside, but Yo-Yo recognizes it and asks Fontaine to move now. They drive fast and see the van parked next to a church. They rescue Slick and enter a church, continuing their search for answers. Fontaine sees a keycard slot where he places the ID that Slick took from the van. Suddenly, an elevator appears out of nowhere. Once again, they get into it to go to the lab's underground area, but this facility was quite unlike the earlier lab. Inside, there were many scientists working. 3 of them were kidnapped, and the trio took their lab coats and entered the lab wearing them. Once inside, they discovered that the Glen's entire neighborhood underground was actually a lab facility. In this place, scientists were abducting residents and using them for various experiments. Even though they were being watched by white scientists, these other scientists had managed to create clones of many people living in the city. Next, they start to check the container and notice that it also contains a clone of Fontaine and Slick. Fontaine was pissed and starts shooting, but Yo-Yo stops him and explains that only a specific group of city residents has been cloned, and these are not regular citizens, so they need to make careful plans to expose them. They then escape and take an elevator that leads them to a neighborhood club as they continue their mission. However, the DJ of the club receives a call from the scientist, and he plays a unique song that hypnotizes everyone in the club and asks them to catch the trio. Outside, they ride in a car and the group of people runs after them. Not too far, the car automatically stops, and the group of people stops and stares at them. They get out of the car and we see another car coming to them. As the car opens, we see Chester, a clone of Fontaine, and a man named Nixon. It appears that these people are collaborating on secret projects in disadvantaged black communities to keep their work hidden. Their goal is to create human clones and restore peace in America. Nixon gave them 2 options. The first option was Chester would kill them, and the second option was to walk away and go with their own life. Fontaine doesn't agree to anything and raises his gun to Nixon's head, but Nixon quickly uses a code saying Olympia Black, which makes Fontaine stop and fall under his control. Even Slick can't move. They follow Nixon's command. However, Yo-Yo remains unaffected by his words. In response, Nixon takes control of Fontaine and holds Yo-Yo at gunpoint, threatening to harm everyone if the investigation doesn't stop. After Nixon speaks and leaves, everyone in the background goes back to their normal selves. The next morning, Fontaine wakes up feeling really upset and disturbed. When Yo-Yo starts knocking on his door, she starts making crazy plans, but Fontaine gives up and just wants to live his life, which makes Yo-Yo upset and walks away. The following day, Fontaine thinks of talking to his mom, but when she doesn't go out of her room, Fontaine opens the door, but when he enters, he sees a tape recorder on the table where it's tapped to the lab. This discovery makes Fontaine realize that everything in the room is fake, and it angers him so much that he starts smashing everything. On the other hand, Yo-Yo writes a letter to the US government to inform them about the entire operation. But before the letter can be delivered, Nixon intercepts it and starts cloning it as well. They capture Yo-Yo and bring her to the lab. Meanwhile, Fontaine and Slick put up a strategy where the people in the lab thinks they are just living their normal life. Fontaine meets with the rival gang and explains that the scientists beneath the city are capturing people and making clones of them alongside the kidnappings. Slick's plan is to pretend the gang rival shoots and kills Fontaine, so the people from the lab will take Fontaine's body and then transport him to the lab. Fontaine regains consciousness in the laboratory. He then gathers information about Yo-Yo's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Slick gathers the neighborhood gang and forcefully infiltrates the laboratory through one of the elevators, causing chaos as they go. Amid the turmoil, Yo-Yo becomes the subject of a new hair dye experiment. She pretends to lose consciousness and tricks the lab technicians. They don't know that she is wearing a wig. She then escapes into the corridor. Along the way, she crosses paths with Slick, who confesses his feelings for her. Meanwhile, Fontaine finds himself facing his clone Chester, and ultimately suffers defeat in their intense fight. He's then taken to Nixon's office. On the other hand, Slick and Yo-Yo manage to release the clones from captivity, but they unexpectedly come face to face with Nixon amidst the chaos. As Fontaine regains consciousness in Nixon's office, he is greeted by the lead geneticist, an older version of himself. This elder Fontaine reveals his grand plan. He has created numerous clones to maintain peace in a deeply divided America. He believes that Afro-Americans hold the key to unification and aims to assimilate them into society to bring about this unity. However, Fontaine finds the idea of assimilating African Americans into society as a means of unification is absurd. On the other hand, when Slick attempts to attack Nixon, he loses the battle, and Yo-Yo needs to surrender and throws her gun at the back of Nixon. Yo-Yo notices that Slick didn't attack Nixon personally. He wears his coat to his clone and pretends it was him to distract Nixon. When Nixon notices Slick isn't wearing any gold rings, the real Slick appears at the back and shoots him dead. Going back to the other scene, this elder Fontaine decides to share the story of his brother Ronnie's death, deliberately omitting the most painful memories to protect Fontaine from further trauma. He expresses his intention to continue his experiments to prevent others from suffering the same fate, but Fontaine cannot allow this to continue. In an act of desperation, Fontaine used the code to his clone Chester, Olympia Black. He then controls Chester and asks to kill the elder Fontaine. That same day, news reports broke out. It tackles on the incidents in the neighborhood. The clones are seen integrating into society with the help of people willing to assist them. Slick and Yo-Yo locate Fontaine, and Yo-Yo decides to leave for Memphis, with Slick accompanying her. Fontaine expresses his desire to join them on their journey. As we thought that the movie has ended, we see another clone of Fontaine, whose name is Tyrone, awakens in another American city, quite possibly Los Angeles. He is leading a life that mirrors the original Fontaine's existence, residing with his mother, engaging in workouts, sipping drinks, and facing repeated disappointment with the lottery. However, one day as he watches the news, he comes across a startling report about the clones taking to the streets. Amidst the crowd of identical faces, he spots his true self, a sight that leaves him utterly perplexed and intrigued. And the movie ends here. Thank you for watching. Please like and share this video to help this channel out. And see you at the next one.